Welcome back to the class. In this lesson, we're starting the actual page design. So far, we've been preparing, getting everything ready, including colors, typography, imagery. So now we're ready to lay down the first pixels. Now, we'll start with the hero section. This is quite complex, so we'll split it up in two parts. And in this part, we're going to be adding the logo, navigation, and we'll also create a nice looking background for it. So if you're ready to go, let's begin. Back in Figma, we'll switch to the main design page, and we'll start by creating a frame. To do that, you can use the shortcut F for frame. And this activates this right sidebar where you can choose a predefined frame size. This comes in various formats, ranging from desktop sizes to tablet and phone sizes. And you can see the size in pixels right here on the right side. And you can also choose between some common paper sizes and social media sizes. Or if you want a custom size, you can simply click and drag to create the frame to your desired size. If you want to change the size afterwards, all you got to do is select the frame either from the canvas or from the layer list and change the width and height properties on this right-hand side inspector. In my case, I'm going to make this 1600 pixels wide and about 2000 pixels high. Ultimately, it's going to end much bigger in height than this, but as a starting point, this is more than enough. And we can double click here, or we can double click here to rename this. And I'm going to say desktop. Now let's define a column grid. And if you're not very familiar with using grids in web design, well, it's very simple. A column grid is basically a list of vertical columns that you can use to align elements or size elements. So if you're thinking about a 3-column layout, right? It's about aligning content to 3 equal columns in that page. Let me show you what I mean. In Figma, it's really easy to add a column grid. Simply select the frame that you want and go in the inspector and choose layout grid. Simply click on it or simply click on the plus sign. It does exactly the same thing. And from this list where it says layout grid settings, you can choose between grid, which is this, columns, which is what we need, or rows, which is the same thing but horizontal. So we're going to choose columns, and usually you would go for 12 columns. This is kind of a standard number because 12 is easily divisible by 2, 3, 4, and 6. Next, you would set a color for this grid. You can go with any color you want, but make it a color that will let you know that this is actually a grid and it's not part of the actual design. You can also change its opacity here. Under type, we would choose center, and then we would define the width of each column. In my case, I'm going to go with 72. And under gutter, we're going to choose 32. The gutter is basically the distance between these columns. Now, obviously, feel free to use any kind of grid properties you want. In my case, this is what I'm going to be using. Now, if at some point you want to hide the grid, you can click this eye icon here. Or if you want to remove it completely, you can click the minus sign. There's also a keyboard shortcut for it. It's Control G, and you can toggle that on and off, but you can easily find the correct keyboard shortcut if you go to the Figma menu, View, Layout Grids. And you can obviously toggle it from here on and off. All right, so Layout Grid or Column Grid is now created. Let's move on. To know what exactly to put in this hero area, let's refer back to our wireframe. And we can switch to that page. And by the way, there's a quicker way of doing that. You can press page up or page down on your keyboard if you have those keys to swap between pages. This works in Windows and on Mac OS. It's the exact same keyboard shortcut. So if we go to the wireframe, we can see that the hero area, which is this one here, has our header, which contains the logo and navigation. And then it has the hero content, which is comprised of this media object and title, subtitle, and call to action. Now, this bit we'll tackle in the next lesson, so let's not worry about that right now. But in this lesson, we're going to add our logo navigation, and also we'll create a nice looking background for this hero area. So here's how we do that. Let's start with the background. Let's go ahead and hide this grid because we don't need it right now. And let's start with a rectangular shape. For that, press R, or you can choose from this list of tools right here. And we'll simply click on the canvas, or we can click and drag and create one of a custom size. So let's make one that's the same width as our canvas. Let's push it up. And under Fill, let's choose a linear gradient. Now, to get the correct color values, I'm going to refer back to the Color tab. So I'm going to grab my primary color and place it here. Let's see, which one is it? It's this one. And then for the other color, I'm going to choose my second primary color, which is this. And this actually needs to be 100% opacity. Now, if you're not entirely happy with how the gradient looks like, you can actually use these sliders to move the color stops up and down, left or right. It really depends on your view here. So if you want more of this purple, you would just move it like this. If you want more of the blue, you would move it like this. And if you want to create like an angle, you can click on these individual handles and you can move them around until you get to where you want. So in my case, I think I'm just going to do something like this. And that should be plenty strong for now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this rectangle and I'm going to rotate it. To do that, you can enter a new value in the rotation field here. So let's go with 16 degrees. All right, that's pretty good. Now I'm going to resize this so that it fills my page completely, like so. And I'm also going to round off the corners. And I'm going to add a big border radius of 64 pixels. Now, how you get these values, it doesn't really matter. In my case, I'm using the 8-point system. So 16, 64, these are all multiples of 8. It doesn't matter for the vertical rhythm, but it just makes it easier for me to remember. All right, so now you can move this left and right, up and down, until you find a suitable position for it. You can also activate the layout grid and align it to the grid if you want. So in my case, I'm just going to leave it about there. Now, something else I'm going to do is add a drop shadow to this. For that, select it, go to Effects, click, select Drop Shadow, and select this sun icon to open the settings. For the settings, I'm going to select 30 for blur, 0x, 20 for Y, And as for the color, well, I'm going to use my main gray color. So copy it from here, paste it in here, and for opacity, I'm going to choose 20%. Now, here's a pro tip. Whenever you're using these effects, you can actually create templates for them. So with the element selected, where you have the effect, click on this style button and click on the plus sign and just type in a name. In my case, I'm going to say drop shadow, create style. So what this does is if I have another element, for example, and I want to add the exact same drop shadow, I can select that, go to effects, and select drop shadow. And now it has the exact same one. Now, if I want to change the drop shadow on both of these, I can click on the or outside of any element, and that's going to select my canvas. And I can find local styles here. I can select drop shadow, edit style, and I can change its properties here. So maybe I want a different color. See how it changes on both elements? That's the power of working with local styles like these. It makes reusable styles very effective. Now you can do the same with gradients, for example. So where it says fill, maybe I want to save this gradient for later use. I can click on the same color or the same button where it says style, and under color styles, I'm going to hit plus. And I'm going to type main gradient. Cool. Now, let's add a little bit of more visual interest to this section. I'm going to select this, Command D to duplicate it, and I'm going to change its rotation to 12 degrees. I'm going to right click and select Send to Back. And this is going to put it behind my main layer. I'm just going to adjust its positioning a little bit, something like that. And maybe push it down a little bit as well. And I'm going to change its overall opacity to 30%. Now, I want to show you some cool tricks here. When you have an element selected, you can press any number between 1 and 0 to change its opacity. So if I press 1, it's setting its opacity to 10%. 2, 20%, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0 changes it to 100%. Now, if you do these numbers in rapid succession, for example, 3, 4, this changes the opacity to 34. Here's another example, 12, 76, 32. If I do 3 and 2, it changes its opacity to 30% and then 20%. So in my case, let's leave this at 30%. Now let's do this again. Let's duplicate this main section and let's change its rotation to 26 degrees. And we're going to put this all the way in the back. To do that, you can right click and select Send Backwards. And then again, right click, Send Backwards, or you can do it all at once by selecting Send to Back. And that's going to put it all the way in the back. Alternatively, you can simply click and drag the rectangle from the Layers panel. For this bit, I'm going to change its opacity to 10%, and I'm just going to move it to the left and to the right until I find a suitable position for it. I think that looks pretty good. Now here's another tip. You can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move elements. Up, down moves that element 1 pixel at a time. Left, right does the same thing. But if you hold down Shift while doing that, it's going to move it 10 pixels at a time. So this is a very quick way of moving objects on your canvas without using the mouse. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now, to finish this off, let's do this. Let's duplicate this one more time. Let's change its rotation to 26, but this time let's move it inside to somewhere like this. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Now, under fill, I'm going to remove my main gradient and I'm going to add a linear fill from white to transparent. So this is actually white 0%. And let's actually swap these. So I go from solid white to transparent white. And I'm going to change its opacity to 5%. And by doing that, I just get this very nice looking effect where I start with white here and it just fades off as it goes up. And I can even make this smaller, like so. And with that, we can select all of these, Command G or Control G if you're on a PC to group all of these together. And let's call it background. And with that, the hero background is done. Let's go ahead and add the logo and navigation. For that, let's bring up the layout grid and let's open up our brand assets. We're going to grab our white logo, simply click and drag, and let's position it somewhere in our page. Now, the logo, we're going to make it 48 pixels in height. And this little button here will constrain its proportions, meaning when you change one value, either width or height, the other value will resize accordingly. If you uncheck this, you can change these values individually. But in my case, I want to make my logo 48 pixels in height. Why 48? Well, because I'm using the 8-point grid system. So any element should have a height that's a multiple of 8. Now I'm going to take my logo and I'm going to position it so that it's 64 pixels from this edge. To do that, I'm going to hold down Option on Mac, but you can hold down Alt on a PC, so on Windows. And I'm going to move my mouse cursor until I can reference the edges that I want. So notice where it says 71 pixels here. That means the logo is 71 pixels from that edge. And I can use my arrow keys now on my keyboard to just nudge it in place so that it's 64 pixels now from that left edge. I'm also going to place it 64 pixels from the top. So to do that and make it easier for myself, I can use the down key 2 times. And now I'm going to hold down Shift and use the up key 1, 2, 3 times. Because if you remember, holding down the Shift key while nudging an element will do that in increments of 10 pixels instead of 1. So now my logo is perfectly positioned exactly where I want it. Now, let's do the navigation. For that, let's start with the text element. You can press T on your keyboard or click this little button here. And I'm going to type in the first menu item. According to our wireframe, we have 4 menu items: features, screenshots, testimonials, and pricing. So actually one thing you can do is you can grab these links individually, copy them from the wireframe, and paste them here. How cool is that? Now for the color, we're going to be using white, 90%. And for the text, we'll use Brandon Grotesque, which is the typeface for our headings, 18 pixels, regular, 24 pixels, line height. And then we need to position these at equal distance from one another. We could do this manually by selecting each one and going, okay, this is at 24 pixels. Maybe I want it to be at 32 pixels, and I can do that. And then you would need to do the same with the rest. And usually this works, but there's a much easier way of doing things, and that's by using auto layout. This is probably my favorite feature in Figma. Auto layout allows you to group a set of elements and set equal distance between them or around them. It's the same as using margin and padding in CSS. So to do that, you would select all the elements that you want to add, and you can click on auto layout, or you can press Shift A on both Mac and Windows, or you can right click and select add auto layout. So this is going to create a new frame that contains all of your elements, and then by default it looks at how your elements are positioned. Mine are one after the other, so it shows horizontal, but I can change this to vertical if I want to. And this is the cool part. Here I can set horizontal padding, so this will add space on the right and on the left. I can add vertical padding, which will add space on the top and bottom, and I can specify spacing between items. This is the one that we're interested in right now. So let me undo, and I'm going to specify 24 pixels. So now my elements are perfectly spaced apart. This is one feature that I highly recommend you use all the time because it just makes your job so much easier. So with that, we're going to grab our main menu and we're going to position it. We're going to align it to the grid. I'm not sure if you can see it here properly, but now it's aligned to the grid, and Figma is actually very smart about this. It automatically snaps it into place. And then I can select my menu and my logo, and I can go here to the alignment panel and I can set align vertical centers. Easy as pie. And with that, the first part of our hero is complete. We have the logo, the navigation, and the background. All right, the first part of the hero section is now complete. If you didn't follow along and worked alongside me, go ahead and create it right now so you're ready for the next step. And as usual, feel free to bring your own flair, your own vision to this design. I would love to see these results in the project gallery. Now, assuming you successfully designed this first part of the hero area, I think it's time to finish it. And we'll do it in the next lesson where we're going to add the hero content. So I'll see you there.